Hey guys, Dr. Bain here of SpringBack Chiropractic. Just wanted to make a quick video on immunity. I know right now a lot of people are kind of confused about what to do with the coronavirus in this flu season, but I want to give you some great news that there are some things that you can do at home in order to prevent yourself from getting the flu, and if you do get it, to give yourself the best chance of recovery. So let's go over some things. There's a couple of common issues that we need to consider. One, a lack of hand washing. Two, improper sneeze and cough control. So make sure that if you're sneezing and coughing that you do it into your elbow, okay? Don't just disperse it out, and especially don't do it directly into your hands because then you're gonna spread things very, very easily. Now, here's another problem is a lot of people are utilizing most of the time pharmaceutical drugs in order to fight the symptoms once you've gotten something instead of supporting your symptoms when you've got something. So we'll talk a little bit about that. And lastly, a lot of people are lacking exercise and proper diet. So that's another thing that we need to kind of consider when we're talking about immunity. So there's two real perspectives on health, and as I always tell my patients, where I say medical and then there is a natural approach. Number one, a medical difference is that they are treating or fighting symptoms. One great example of this is that they give ibuprofen in order to lower a fever. Now, at the end of today's talk, we're really going to talk more about fever and how covering up a fever is actually counterintuitive to you beating something, especially if it's viral. Secondly, they're on a disease model of health. Third, they like to separate the system or the body into separate systems: cardiovascular, gastroenterology, you've got psychology. All these different things are kind of pulling apart your body into different pieces. Lastly, as treatment, you're either going to get pharmaceutical drugs or surgery. That's about all they've got to offer most of the time. Not that that's a bad thing necessarily, but in terms of health and in terms of prevention, not exactly helpful. On a natural side, here's the difference. One, we're actually wanting to support your body's symptoms. For example, if you get a fever during an illness, that's actually a good thing because that's your body's attempt in order to increase your immune system function and to decrease the ability of viruses, for example, to replicate. The higher the temperature goes, the harder it is for viruses to replicate and the stronger your immune system gets. So we'll talk about that at the end, how important that really is. Number two, this is a holistic model of health, meaning we're not separating the body into separate systems. We tend to believe that one piece going wrong can affect the whole body. Much like a car, if something goes wrong in a vehicle that had been previously running well now doesn't run so well. We're talking about a holistic body system, and then our interventions are going to be herbal, vitamin, mineral, structural, and neurological. And that's with my different body approach that I do. But we're not talking about that today. We're talking more about natural methods of, say, immune system boosting. So dietary changes. What can you do with your diet? Well, number one rule is you have to lower your added sugar and artificial sweeteners. My goal for most folks is to stay below 20 grams of added sugar a day. Now, that doesn't include fruit sugars, right? Now, of course, I'm not talking about juice. Juice does count. I'm talking about if you're eating an apple or eating a banana. I don't count those, right? Nobody ever got diabetes or killed themselves off of eating bananas and apples, unless you have, of course, an allergy. But we're talking about things like white sugar, brown sugar, molasses, corn syrup, all of that stuff. Artificial sweeteners. These things hide in everything. If you're drinking those Bang energy drinks, it is loaded with artificial sweeteners. And those are not only just as bad as regular sugar, if not worse. We know that it's been linked to all different types of diseases when you consume those. So aspartame, sucralose, a lot of different ones. You can Google those. There's plenty of them on there. Number two, limit simple carbohydrates. These are things like cereals, pastas, white bread, white rice, very quickly absorbed items that then basically force your glucose levels in your body to go up. You produce too much insulin, and now you're on your way to diabetes if you don't already have it. And a weaker immune system. Number three, increase your vegetable intake. Now, I'm not picky with what vegetables. Whatever vegetable you want to put in your body is good with me. Just some examples are things like broccoli, kale, peppers, cabbage, pretty much literally anything. And I love all the colors. Lastly, go organic. Non-organic foods have been sprayed with pesticides, herbicides, and a bunch of nasty stuff that you really don't want in your body and that we know not only causes disease, but also weakens the immune system. So now let's go a little bit into prevention. What can you do to prevent yourself from getting these things? One, here's the obvious one, wash your hands and do it regularly. And here's the interesting piece, you don't need antibiotic soaps. All the studies that we've done on antibiotic hand soaps that are out in the general public availability don't really do anything better for you. And in fact, they actually kill wildlife. So just doing regular soap and water is good enough. And here's the thing, coronavirus specifically, it's a virus, so antibiotics aren't going to do anything against it anyway. Number two, cough and sneeze in your elbow, like we said. Don't just spread it out and spray it everywhere for everyone to breathe in and get exposed to. Avoid touching your face, as many of you have heard now. Lastly, and I think this is the one that people forget, wipe down your phone as much as possible during these times. I like to use natural cleansers. 7th generation is my favorite. Okay, now here's the big ones. Here are some natural immune boosting herbs that you could start taking right now. Andrographis, elderberry capsules or syrup, holy basil, berberine, monolaurin, Oregon grape, echinacea purpura, zinc, and vitamin D. Now, there's a couple of little caveats with some of these. I think the best ones, and if I had to, for myself, what am I doing? Myself, I'm doing elderberry capsules. I find the syrups tend to have too much sugar and artificial sweeteners. I'm doing zinc, and I'm taking personally 30 milligrams a day. That may be too much for some folks, but you could at least do a minimum of 10 milligrams a day. And if you've got kids and you're worried about your kids, don't worry about it. I have a slide here coming up where I'm going to tell you how you can utilize these things with your kids in the correct dosages for their smaller bodies. Here's a big one, vitamin D. Most of you that are watching this right now are severely deficient. When I do functional lab work analysis in my office, I find that almost 90% of my patients are vitamin D deficient, even in beautiful Arizona. So I personally am taking 10,000 IUs a day currently of vitamin D. Now you may want to at least be on a minimum of 5,000, but I find that 10,000 can be safely taken for quite some time before we'd be worried about it being too much vitamin D. So I would suggest 10,000 IUs, especially right now, probably at least through April. Okay, now here's the most controversial part that everybody seems to have a lot of confusion about, including, unfortunately, doctors still don't really understand this like they should. So let the fever ride. I cannot emphasize this enough. This is one of the most common mistakes that are being made currently in medical practice that should be eliminated immediately. Okay, here's a bunch of different studies I've got on here, and these are just a few that I've picked out that you could go on and read. But we know, and we've known this for quite some time, that there are mounting pieces of evidence that are showing that when you use things like ibuprofen to lower a natural, remember this label, a natural fever, that you're exponentially making it more difficult for this person to recover from a disease at minimum. And at worst, you are increasing their chances of actually dying and having higher mortality rates. Okay, because what a fever does for you is, like we've said it before, one, it boosts your immune system. So it actually creates a better environment for your body to attack and kill these viruses and bacteria. And two, what it does, and especially in the case of viruses, and we know this from animal study, is that a fever actually makes it very difficult for a virus to replicate. So meaning that if you have this, say coronavirus or any other virus, to be honest with you, it'll be much more difficult for it to replicate within your body, meaning that your immune system can then attack it, get rid of it a lot faster. This is one of the number one reasons that I see patients, right, who get sick, and this is just outside of coronavirus, how long they have these colds and flus for, right? Because they're taking NyQuil, they're taking Dayquil, they're taking ibuprofen. I mean, they're taking everything. And whereas someone like me who does this more naturally, lets the fever ride, uses herbs and vitamins and minerals, I'll beat something in 4 to 5 days. They'll beat it in 4 to 6 weeks. Okay, so here's the caveat. Okay, because don't let this get you too triggered on this. Okay. The type of fever that needs to be suppressed are what we call an unnatural fever. These are fevers that happen in a reaction to something else. For example, if you're having an allergic reaction to, say, a pharmaceutical drug, say you had penicillin and you're highly allergic to penicillin and now you're getting a fever of upwards of 107, okay, now that is a fever that we need to bring down because now you're risking brain damage. And like we'll talk about this, you don't risk brain damage until you hit around 107.6 degrees Fahrenheit. So So my rule of thumb is if you're below 106-degree fever or less, let it ride unless it's unnatural, right? From a drug, or maybe you were injected with something that you reacted to, like a heavy metal, right? That's when you need to lower that fever, just to make sure you don't get brain damage. A natural fever will almost never, ever get to the point of causing brain damage, ever. So fever in kids, right? Here's a cool factoid. And you can look this up, you can check me on this. Infants and young children can have fevers up to 107 degrees with a very, very minimal risk of brain damage, if any at all, okay? Only when it goes beyond 107.6 degrees Fahrenheit do you actually get a possible risk of brain damage, okay? And when we're talking about fevers, 99%, and that's not an actual statistic, but just from my experience out in the field, it's almost never ever going to get that point in anyone's lifetime, okay? Most fevers will never ever get there in your entire lifetime, okay? So if your child has a fever, or yourself, of 106 or less, let it ride, okay? Just make sure that you're staying hydrated, okay? So like I said here, keep your child hydrated. You can give them herbal and vitamin mineral supplements that I've suggested in the previous slide, but I'm going to tell you right below this, here's the rule of thumb for how do you dose children. Okay, so 1/3 the dosage of 150-pound adults for ages 6 to 12. 1/8 the dosage for under 6 years down to infancy, okay? And kids 12 years and older can just have the adult dose. Or if it's actually on the supplement itself, you can just follow the directions on there. Unless sometimes on the herbs, they actually purposefully put it on there and it'll say on there, or as prescribed by your healthcare practitioner. When you see that label, it usually means you should be taking double what it says to take as a normal dosage. And lastly, monitor your child. So if you're letting the fever ride, which I believe that you should, okay, you're looking for just the red flags, of course, to know, oh, okay, is this something more serious, okay? Are they unresponsive? Are they overly lethargic? Now, of course, they're going to be lethargic if they're sick, right? But if you've got a really bad gut feeling that they're not just a bit lethargic and that they're overtly lethargic and unresponsive, now that's when you should have your child checked out by a healthcare practitioner and take them in to get taken a look at. So just remember, they're sick, okay? They're not going to feel great, okay? And that's normal. Only in these certain situations I've just described above should you be worried about needing to take them in to get evaluated and possibly lower a fever, okay? So here's my contact information, you guys. We're right here in Surprise, corner of Bell and Litchfield. I do also do functional lab work analysis, and we're actually doing 25% off of that right now, but I didn't make this video for that. I just made it because there's been a lot of confusion from not only my patients, but others in the community that have asked me to kind of reach out and make a video about this and give you some opinions on what you can do to protect you and your family and friends very easily. I mean, we've been living through flu epidemics for a very, very long time. And just that sadly, some of this knowledge about natural methods has been lost to the general public when this used to be common knowledge a long time ago. So here's my contact information, guys. Feel free to give me an email or a phone call. We're going to be open the entire time throughout this Corona thing, unless they're forcing us to shut down, but I don't foresee that happening. So I know I'm here to take care of the sick, and that's my job. So anyway, guys, thank you so much. Dr. Bain, SpringBack Chiropractic.